So today is lesson 3, and what are we doing today? Well, we are going to set up our database tables in AWS. We're going to do a little review of saving data using a new table. We're going to make a genres table so we can connect each artist to a genre. And then we're going to work on, this is going to be part of our class, then we're going to work on retrieving data and formatting it using different HTML structures. So how do we create a list? How do we populate a drop-down menu? And then how do we build a grid of rows and columns, all from a database query? And then lastly, I'm going to assign lab 1, which will be due Sunday night, and that's for you to practice reading data. So everybody should have received an updated set of AWS credentials from last week. If you didn't, you can continue to use your local your local MySQL database for today, but everybody should have those credentials. So we're going to get connected to our AWS database first. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to connect to our Openvpn. You should have that connection from last semester. If you do not have the Openvpn software, let's say you got a new computer. I know I've had a new computer. So the Openvpn setup is here on D2L. So under weekly learning, links, tools, and resources, there's a file for you to download, and then instructions about how to download the software. Dominic, you should have received an email, I'll put it in the chat, from CSTech@Computer Studies. I provided a full class list with everyone's Lakehead email. Yeah, it would have been sometime in the middle of last week. If you don't have it, you can check your spam folder. And if you are sure you do not have, do a search on AWS. And if you can't find it, then you can send an email to the CS technician. The email address is in the chat, CSTech@Computer Studies. Okay, great. Yeah, most of you should have it. If you don't have it, you can request it from them now. Tell them you're in my class. But for today, if you need to continue using your local MySQL, that's fine, but you will need AWS in order to do the lab. So I'm going to connect to the VPN. Yeah. So here's how to log into it. Let me disconnect, close this up. So anytime you're going to be working with PHP, yes, it should be sent to your Lakehead email. Dominic, I exported the class list from D2L and provided everyone's Lakehead emails. So every time you come to class, you're going to open up Openvpn first of all. It might be running in your system tray. But if not, you can just open up your little Openvpn, and then you should have your student connection saved from last semester. All you need to do is click on it, and it should connect right away. So do this when you come to class every week, because we're going to be working with the AWS server every class. So we're always going to need this. So I'm connected now. And then we want to add, if you haven't already, I'm going to show you how to add the MySQL connection to AWS into Workbench. Again, the instructions are here on D2L, so I've put it in writing if you need to refer to the instructions in the future. Instructions on how to connect your MySQL database, they are here under links and resources. Instructions are here as a text file, but we're going to go through it. So once we are connected to the VPN, we can open up Workbench. And we're going to create a connection here. We'll save our credentials permanently in Workbench, so every time we come back here, we'll just be able to click on it. We won't have to enter the credentials every time. So what you'll do is click on beside MySQL connection. You'll click the plus sign. Up at the very first input, it says connection name, so call it AWS. The host name, which I'll also put in the chat, is 172.3.1.2.2.4.3. You'll enter your username here. So it's usually something like first name and your student number, I think, is the algorithm. Yes, we're using MySQL Workbench. So you can find your username in the email that you would have gotten last week, should have been on the 18th, last Tuesday. And then you can also copy and paste the password, and to store it permanently, if you click beside password, there's a button here that says Store in Vault. So you click it and just paste in your password here and click OK. So this will store your credentials permanently, so you're not going to have to enter them every time you come back to Workbench. So when you're done, you can just click OK. I'll repeat, what do I do if I don't have that email? Make sure you're in your Lakehead email. Check your junk folder. Search. You can search for this IP address, an email with that IP, 172.3.1.2.2.4.3. Everybody in the class should have it because I provided a full class list to our technicians last week. If for some reason you don't have that email, then you can email cstech@georgiancollege.ca. Tell them you're in my class and you need an AWS account. You never got one last week. So then give it a connection name, your IP address, and then the username and password from that email. So now anytime you want to connect, we just open Workbench and you can just click on your connection. Which should not take this long. I'm not sure what's happening. Yes, I'm getting an error too. Okay, so it's happening to everybody. So I'm going to try my FTP connection, see if that's working. Doesn't look like it. This should connect pretty much instantly, both FileZilla. I'm going to try the VPN again, disconnect, reconnect. Our server seems to have died. That's good timing. I'm going to need to let our technicians know to look into the problem because I'm not sure what's going on. So bear with me for a second. Pause the recording. So again, I've grabbed this item, the lesson 3 SQL script. I've grabbed it off of D2L, copied it, come down to my SQL editor. I've added a use statement here with my database name, and then I just pasted it in, and I clicked execute. Now you'll notice you don't see the table here. Right now, the only table that shows up is artists. Well, that's weird, right? Workbench is giving me a green check mark. It said the create table, the genres table, it should work. So why doesn't it show up? It's just because this window needs to be refreshed. Up here, there's a little refresh button. Besides schemas, if I click it, notice now my genres table is here. So I've now got two tables, the artist table we made last week and the genres table I just created. Just keep trying our server. See if AWS is back. Doesn't look like it. I'll keep checking it. So we actually now want to create a two simple pages so we can populate data into the genres table. So let's open up our code editor. Again, make sure your Apache server is running. I'm going to go and open Visual Studio Code. And I'm going to open up my PHP Tunes site from last week. So last week we built an artist details form. That looks like this. So we're going to build a genre details form. We can actually just copy and paste and make one little change to it. So I'm going to make a new page called genre details. And then I'm actually just going to copy the contents of artist details. We'll just copy it, paste it. And then we just need to make a couple of changes. So in the title, on line 5, and in my heading on line 11, I'm just replacing the word artist with the word genre. I've just changed those two instances of artist to genre. I need to make only one more change to this page. What other things should we modify? Thank you, Raj. Yeah, the action, this page isn't going to go to save artist. It's going to go to save genre, which we're going to build next. So now we've got two forms. They're almost identical. They just have different titles and headings and different page actions because they're each going to call a different save page. Excuse me. So now I should also be able to load in the browser genre details. Forms, they look pretty much identical. Nope, we're not going to because the input is also called name. Good question, Alex. We had a name field in the artist table, but we also have the same column name. Good question, but because they're the same, we don't actually have to change it. So if I fill out the genre here, it's looking for save genre, which gives us a 404. This behavior is to be expected because we don't have this page yet. Again, we can just, I think we can do a copy on the save artist. So I'm going to go to my save artist page. Again, we're only going to have to make a couple of very small changes here. This page is almost identical. I'll just click Control A and copy it. And I'm now going to make save-artist save genre.php. So I'm going to paste it in. And we've got to make just a few changes here. I want to change the title, again on line 5. My database connection is the same. but we need to modify our SQL. We don't want to insert this name into the artist table. We want to insert it into the genres table. So I'm changing the table name in our insert. The rest of this code is actually all the same because our column is still called name, our parameter is still called name. And again, I'll change the word artist down at the bottom to say genre saved. So it's almost an exact repeat of our artist and save artist, but this time we're working with the genres table instead. So we should actually be able to go and try this out and try saving some genres to the database. So I'll go to my form, and if I save it now, hopefully we'll get a message that says genre saved, and then we can go and query the database and see if it's in there. Save. Tells me my record was saved. If I hop back over to Workbench, I can now run the command select star from genres. And if I highlight just this one command, I don't want to run this whole thing, I can't create this table again, or I'll get an error, because we've already got a table now called genres. But now if I want to look inside the contents, with my select star from genres query, I can highlight it and execute it. And now I've got one record here. I'm going to go back to my form and add a few more. So I'll click back. You can add whatever records you like in the database. So I've added 3. I run my query again. I've got rock, alternative, and jazz. You can put whatever kind of, whatever you like. Yep. You don't have to put in the same data that I do. The data itself doesn't really matter here. Okay, so our save page is working. So for our next trick, so we've got 2 pages that save to the database now. We have our save artist page, right? If we look in what was in the artist table from last week, we've got, I put a bunch of 4 artists in here. And now we've got a page where we can save genres. And what we really want to focus on today is the ability to read the data out of the database and display it on a web page. And there's various formatting options we might use to display either the artist data or the genre data. We're going to do both. Let's keep trying AWS. Any questions so far? But our genre table or our pages for saving the genre data. Okay, PHP myadmin. Try to start MySQL as well. If PHP myadmin won't load for you, you can also use Workbench. Okay, so try to connect through Workbench instead. Yep, still down. We'll just keep checking. So we want to start working with the genre data first. Okay, thanks, Raj. Hey, Don, maybe post in the chat or send me a private message what response you get. If Apache is running and won't load, something may be wrong. Should be running and should load. So we're going to write a page first to do a really simple query to fetch the genres and display them on a page. It's kind of a throwaway page. We're not going to probably use it, but let's make a new file called genres.php. And we'll just put on our boilerplate HTML. So the same HTML we've got on all of our pages. And then in the body, we'll nest a set of PHP tags. So let's put our comments in first before we write any of the code. So we want this page to display all of the genres from the genres table of the database. We want to show the names. So what steps do you think we'll need to follow in order to get this to work? How are we going to get that data out of the database and display it in the browser? Yeah, absolutely. We will need to connect. Okay, absolutely. Yep. Then once we have a connection, what else we need to do? Okay, yes. So we will query the genres table. Yep. So this is going to give us a list of data, right? So right now I've got 3 records, but it could be 300. Yeah, we're going to need an SQL select. So query the genres table using a select command. Yep. So Raj, yeah, we're going to display it, but how are we going to display it? So this is going to give us a list, right? When we query, we will display using echo, yes. But this is going to give us back an array. Right? So we're going to get a 2-dimensional array because each record has 2 columns, right? There's the genre ID and there's the name. So when we query the database, we're going to get back an array. So if we have an array of data, yes, we are going to break it up, Mike. And then how do we break it up into and display each record? Because there could be 3 genres, there could be 30, there could be 300. Yes, Hussein, excellent. So we're going to use a loop and display each genre. And then we're going to disconnect. So the process, whenever we're fetching data from the database, it's going to be used, we're going to use this same process. We're going to do it over and over and over again. And you're going to think, today you're probably going to think, wow, this is complicated. And in a few weeks, you're going to think, wow, this is super easy. It's repetitive. As we talked about in my class this morning, someone said, wow, like this is overwhelming. I'm trying to remember everything. You don't learn this stuff by memory. You learn this. This is a skill. It's like any other skill. You learn by doing it. So if you're learning to play an instrument or learning another language or learning a new sport, you can't just watch other people do it and memorize how to do it. You actually have to do the skill yourself over and over again to get good at it. And web programming, it's exactly the same. So it's not about memorizing, it's about doing these things over and over again so that you understand what you're doing and you learn how to recognize and fix your mistakes. So our connection, for the moment, I know it's not very efficient, but I'm just going to repeat it. Again, when we're learning something, repetition is good because it helps us start to internalize the mechanics of what we're doing. So my username and my password. Later on, if our AWS server comes back, we're going to want to use AWS for this. So my database name is phptunes, my username is root, I have no password. Our SQL query is just select. This is the same query that I just executed in Workbench so I could look into the table and see what's there. Then we set up a command. With our connection and our query. Like we did last week in our save page, we execute the command. So this actually will run the query in the database. Now there's one more step that we need when we are selecting data, which is we need a variable or an object to store the data that comes back. So I'm going to create a variable called genres. And we need to call fetch all. Otherwise, our query runs, but the data is not stored anywhere in memory. So in order to access the query results, there's a few different fetch methods. So this tells us it returns an array containing all the result set rows. So if we're querying multiple records, we're going to use fetch all. Later on, if we want to query a single record, like we want to look up one artist, we can just use the fetch method. So fetch in PDO is for one record, fetch all is for a list of records. And now we should be able to use a for each loop, as Tuani suggested. Let's say genres is our full data set. Genre, current, record, in the loop. So for starters, we just want to print out. We don't really care about the IDs, but Michael's suggesting, yeah, let's break it up. We just want to see the name. So inside our loop, we can echo the name column of the current record. And then to disconnect, we just set our connection to null. So this should print out all of the genre names. Whatever's in the database should show up. We'll give it a shot. So if I browse to our genres.php, I get, right now it shows as a single string, which is not very good, but it's a start. So it shows me in order by ID the records that are in my database table. So this is a really simple, really ugly, dynamic web page where the content is being fetched and served from the database contents. Now, we haven't used any sort of formatting. And normally when we get a query result, we're going to format it in some way. Right? We're not just going to print them out like this. Let's look at some of the common, I would say there's 3 or 4 really common ways to format or package up our data, our dynamic data for display. We can actually see examples here. So one common way of displaying data is a grid. We're going to do this later. Grid of rows and columns. We might have things like a list where we display them in a vertical list. Or we might have things like cards. We can even we might even see things like drop-down lists. So we're going to play around with all of these. Okay, if you are getting an error, that suggests to me, well, we can turn the debugging on. You probably didn't create the table in your database. To be sure, okay, Dominic, you fixed yours as well? Okay. Yeah, make sure you execute the create table script in your database. Ah, missing semicolon. Happens to all of us. So I want to add a little bit of formatting here. So I'm going to use a list. So before our loop, I'm going to create a list. So I'm just going to open up. I'm going to put an opening UL tag here. And after the loop, I'm going to close the UL. So what would we need to do in here to make each genre a new item in the list? How could we format? Yeah, exactly. We'll wrap them in li tags. So I'm going to print out an li tag. I'm going to append on the name. And then I'll concatenate the closing li afterwards. This will give us a simple, shrink it down. Now we've got a simple bulleted list. So we use dynamic lists all the time. Maybe for navigation links. We could even add Bootstrap to this. Maybe we want our list to look like this. We could use this list group and list group class so that there are genres working this way. If we add the link, I think we did it on our, if we go to our genre details, yeah, here's our Bootstrap link. So I'm going to copy this into the header of the genres page. And then we can add classes to our UL and LI. The UL is going to get a class of list-group. And the LI, I'm going to give a class of list-group-item. So by adding Bootstrap and giving classes, I can format that list. And now it's using Bootstrap to format. So using UL and LI tags, this is one of the ways that we might format some data that comes out of our database query. It's not the only way, however. We're going to write some more queries into the application, but instead of formatting them as lists, our next query, we want to populate a drop-down list with our genres. So I want to use the similar query on this page. How would we present the genre data on here? So we've got artists, we've got genres. Right now there's no connection, but how do you think they should be connected? What would the relationship look like between genre and artist? Go back if you need it. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, Tyler. We can use a similar query, go and fetch the list of genres, and then in our artist details form, we can embed that list in a dropdown. So when we're creating an artist, we would also have to pick a genre. Now, this is going to involve a little refactoring in our database because our artist table right now, right, it only has columns for ID and name. There's nowhere to store a genre ID. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to delete the artist table and we're going to recreate it. And when we recreate it, we're also going to have a column. Not only are we going to have a column for the genre ID, but that column is going to be attached to the genre IDs in the genre table. They're going to be connected, so we can only have genres that exist in the genre table. If we've got genre ID 1, 2, 3, we can't create an artist in genre ID 50. We'll add a constraint to prevent that. So every artist must belong to an existing genre record for consistency. So I've got another script here we're going to run that you can grab from D2L. It's the Lesson 3 SQL script 2. I'm actually going to make one change. Hang on, let me edit it before you do it. Oh, whoops. We want to first drop the table. So we're going to get rid of the existing table. So you can refresh this item now. We're going to drop the existing table. We're going to recreate the artist table with artist ID and name, but I'm adding 3 more things. We're adding a genre ID and saying it's not null. So we'll now, whenever we add an artist, we have to pick a genre. And then later on, not today, but later in the semester, we want to be able to upload a photo of the artist. So we're going to have a browse button, and we're going to be able to upload and display a picture and attach it to an artist record. So we're not doing that now, but we're going to want this photo column later on in the semester, around week 9, week 10. And then we're also adding, you'll learn this in your database class, we're connecting the genre ID column. We're saying it references the genre ID column in the genres table. So it must contain a valid genre ID. Okay, yes, Dan, I saw that. Yama, could you use a blob? There's 2, no, yes, you could, but typically, we don't typically store the files directly in the database. We typically just store the file name or the link to the file. Because if you store the files directly in the database, your database storage fills up really fast. So we are typically better to just store a link and store the file separately on the server file system. So it's not wrong to use blob. I prefer just to store the file name as a string. Okay, if your format isn't right, check your code. I'll be uploading my code to GitHub in just a minute when we take a break. So if you're a bit behind, you can check your code against mine. I'll upload it shortly. Just make sure you save and refresh. Maybe you have unsaved changes if it's not working. So I'm going to copy this new script and I want to execute it in Workbench, and then we'll take a break. So I'm going to copy that script from D2L, starting with drop table. So we're going to delete the table and recreate it with these new additional fields and the foreign key constraint. I'm going to go back to Workbench. I'm going to paste it in. And I'm going to highlight and execute these 3 commands: drop table, create table, alter table. So this is going to wipe out the artist data that I saved last week. That's fine. I can redo it. So I'm going to highlight those commands and execute. I get all green check marks. And now my artist table is back, but instead of 2 columns, I now have 4 columns. Can you recover the database? If you're hosting on a web platform, most web hosts will keep backups, yes. They'll typically keep a few weeks worth of database backups. So if you delete something or you make a mistake updating the database, which I've done, you can typically go and restore from a backup. Okay, so I've now got an empty artist table. If I run my select query now, my table exists, but there's no data in it, right? Because we just dropped it and recreated it. So any of the data that was in there is gone. That's fine, because we're going to repopulate this table with artists, but we want the artist to be tied to a genre now. We were missing that piece last week. Okay, it's 12:50. I'm going to upload what we've done to Git so far. We're going to take a 10-minute break here. and we'll come back at 1 o'clock.